It's recording now. So
Great.
firstly, thank you, Helen, for actually inviting me today, and to you guys for actually joining us. 10 o'clock. So is that really early still in Tanzania, or is that reasonable now on a Saturday?
I think a day is a day.
No, I think it's reasonable on a Saturday.
But if it was a Sunday, no way?
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So, Helen, I might actually hand over to you. I know that you've created the topic and it's really on emotions and leadership, but I might actually ask each of you. I know Helen certainly has got a few questions that she would like to ask of me, but at any stage, guys, this is a very casual Q&A, pick my brain. I'm pretty transparent. I leave nothing behind. So I'm open to any question, really. So if anything comes to mind, it's really important. Just throw that out at me, and I'll be certain to try and actually come back to you with as much honesty as I could possibly share with you. Okay. So Helen, over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. First of all, thank you for doing this with me. It is amazing. I wanted to let everyone know why we are doing this as well and inviting other people. This could have simply been a conversation between me and you, but in the view of trying to make everyone better and sharing our talents with a broader audience, and if this can favor someone other than me, then we're both happy about that. And so, first of all, I welcome everyone to what would otherwise just be one other candid conversation between Kathy and I. Yes, I hope you find this enlightening. Feel free to ask any questions and just jump in at any time. So the topic, emotions and leadership and emotions, this is a hurdle. Emotions, most of the time as leaders, we are expected to kind of put a certain front, and times can be trying for us as well. We go through life like everyone else. We go through ups and downs, and sometimes the emotions are stemming from the team or they're stemming from your personal life. But there is this expectation that we almost have to always just deal with it and not show it. But what has also come across as something that can be very damaging for the leader themselves, as they are leading a people and everybody else is feeling satisfied. It leaves the leader in a broken state sometimes, or not very functional. So this is why this topic is important. It's very personal to me as well, and I had a few questions around that. I sent them to you, but I'll just briefly just put them out there so people can have context when you talk about them. First of all, it's just to know, okay, is it regarded a weakness or a strength to lead with emotion? Is it, yeah. And if it's regarded a weakness, I would assume that it's not regarded a weakness from the beginning. At what point do you draw the line? Like, okay, you're now too emotional. Or, at what point is it okay to be emotional, and at what point is it not okay? And then there's a whole point. Yes?
Can I start with, because there's actually quite a lot of layers in the questions that you've just raised, so I might actually start right at the beginning. And reality, irrespective of gender or age, everybody actually has got, and I will call it a mask to some extent. So it's this assumption that when you actually turn up into an office, or when you're actually in a professional environment, or when you're actually meeting someone and you're trying to negotiate something, that you need to portray, a certain persona, even your attire, the way that you dress. So there's this incredible, I guess, assumption or a path that's actually been seen that needs to be followed. So I have actually been talking about this quite a bit across Australia, and you know, when I actually lead companies and teams abroad, it's a really important thing that I bring to the table, and that is that all of us, of course, have a personal side to us. And when you're leading, I guess the question that I ask is, what do you actually want, you know, the people that you're actually trying to engage and to steer, what do you want them to actually see of who you are? Do you want them to see this stoic, bravado, strong person? Or is it okay that they actually see that you have vulnerabilities as well? And vulnerability, you know, is sometimes seen through decisions that we make, or it's through emotions. So if I only present as being this strong person that, you know, seems to externally get everything right, it's going to be an uphill battle for anybody else who's trying to step into my shoes, right? Do you agree?
Yes, yes, yes. I've muted my side because it's a bit noisy.
Sure, but the reality is that when you make somebody see, you know, yourself in a particular way, and that's not really, you know, the whole of you, then you're creating an actual obstacle. So I'm not saying that, you know, you need to be an emotional roller coaster, because that's not what you want, you know, as a leader. But you do need to actually say to people or share with them that, you know, I need to take this away. I actually need to be able to either unpack something when you have to process it, or, you know, this is something that's eliciting a response in me, and I need to actually work this out. You know, I've had a similar experience in the past, and emotions. Hello, Diana, welcome on. Can you actually hear us? You know, if people can't see that you can actually process something that you've experienced in the past, or something that's actually creating an emotion for you, whether it's anger or whether it's happiness, you know, it's an emotion, and you find a way to work through it, then how are you actually going to help them create a path forward? How are you going to teach them that they too can actually lead in the way that you do and portray this strength, but still actually show that you too have things that you need to overcome? So, you know, if I go back to, sorry, I'm just going to keep letting people in as they come on. So if you see me distracted, that's what I'm doing, guys, okay? So if you actually think about emotions, don't put it in one block. You know, emotions are actually about a collective you. It's not about you continuously, you know, breaking down and crying. Hello, Canacia, if I pronounced it correctly. So sharing an emotion or sharing an experience that actually puts you in a position of vulnerability, then actually, Canancia, can I ask if you could put yourself on mute, please, because there's background noise? Okay. So does that actually answer the first part of your question, Helen?
Yes, it actually answers the first and a little bit of the last, which I hadn't asked. So yes, yes, it does. Yes, it does.
You know, one of the things, I guess, when we look at people, particularly, you know, if we're looking at politicians, or if we're looking at, you know, people that are constantly on a stage and, you know, they're actually out there, the only thing that we actually see is them in that moment. And so therefore we create this image. We tell ourselves a story about who they actually are, because the only story that we know, the only person that we see is that person as they're actually sitting, you know, or standing in front of us, telling us or sharing their experiences in that moment. But that's not the reality of who we are as people. So as leaders, not only do we need to share, you know, the fact that yes, we do have other experiences, we do have other, I guess, obstacles, but we learn how to actually navigate through them And that's what really makes us leaders as opposed to managers, right?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I think that answers like the first question, and now we know for a fact that it's not a weakness. You don't have to be an emotional roller coaster, but it is okay to show people that you're a person, and that also allows them to be people and process their emotions and learn from how you process yours as well.
Yeah.
That's what I gathered from what you said.
And it's not just that, Helen. The other thing that I, in that sharing of that moment, what it does is that it actually enables trust to be built. So when you can actually share that sort of emotion with someone, they actually feel that you value them because you're actually sharing something that's quite not just only emotional, but it's personal. And when you're trying to develop other people, you want to actually be able to build trust, and you want people to actually feel that you value them. And especially in a business environment, it doesn't matter what that relationship is, whether it's actually employer to employee, or whether it's a B2B business, or whether you're actually just starting a relationship and you're wanting somebody to either invest in your business or to actually partner with you. You need to be able to share those points, those values with one another so that you can build trust. And sharing moments like that actually starts that process. Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. So now I'm gonna ask I think this was the last question. So how do you actually, excuse the noise on my part. So how do you ask for a breather then? Like if you're leading a team, or if there are people depending on you, and at that time you are dealing with your own emotions, or you're dealing with emotions of another person, but you need time off, or you need time off, but to process an emotion, which in most times in the professional world seems like there's never a time for that. It seems like you cannot factor that in and say, okay, can I have time to do this? I need time to do that. How do you say that? Do you say it verbally? How do you communicate that to the people around you who are expecting you to still show up and do your job accordingly and lead your team accordingly, and just continue as though nothing is happening while there's so much happening in your life, maybe in your personal life, or someone who's close to you, or your team, etc., etc.
So are you saying that you're actually dealing with a personal emotion, and that's actually you're overcome at work, and so therefore it's in that moment that you want to actually say to them, Alicia, I need time out? Is that the point? Or is it, an interaction in a business environment where you become emotional and you need to step out?
So for the sake of everyone else, because there are other people here who are business people, so this is because it's for a broader audience and bigger than me, you can address both both situations.
So if I was to actually use, say, my father passed away recently. And, I think when people find that out, they go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And that's natural. And some people might actually become incredibly emotional in that moment just because they're actually sharing a very personal, point with, one another. In that moment, if I actually break down, I don't think that anybody could actually think that I was any less, of a leader, because, I've just shared that my father's actually passed away and I've become vulnerable, and, his memory has actually elicited, tears, or, me having to actually stop and just not talk so that I can regather my thoughts, right? So just actually saying, I'm really sorry, it's still quite raw for me. And I'm still actually grieving and I'm still processing. that makes you human. And while somebody may not necessarily be able to relate because they've not had somebody that they've lost, they still actually recognize that that's actually a painful personal moment. And they will, I can assure you, be okay. You know, I have worked in very formal environments, you know, and look, my background is finance, so I've worked in environments where it is predominantly, you know, a male environment, and I can assure you, not one male would actually look at me and go, "Oh my gosh, she's a blubbering mess." If I actually said in that, you know, moment, "I'm really sorry, I need to gather my thoughts. Can I just take 5 minutes just to step outside and get a glass of water, and I'll come back." It's okay to do that. If I was to actually use the other, scenario where you have a robust discussion, and in that discussion, you know, either of you become quite vocal, or I'll call it passionate, you know, about wanting to present your point, it's really important that you actually take stock of what's happening for you. You know, to recognize your own emotions in those moments is so important that as a leader, because we want to actually be able to, in the next occasion that something like this comes up, deal with it very differently. You know, I don't tend to raise my voice. And when I'm actually challenged, I honestly, I look at that as, oh my gosh, I've never actually looked at it with that light before. You know, it's never crossed my mind to actually think that it's possible to have a different opinion. So I tend to actually sit back and really listen to the other person, because those sort of emotions where people have a heightened response is generally because they don't feel that they're being heard. So to be able to manage a situation, you know, where it's a professional discussion and you have very different opinions, it's really about allowing the other person to actually say what they need to say to explain themselves, and for you to be able to check in with yourself, even if it's against what you're actually thinking, but to allow them to feel like they're actually heard. And the way that we do that is by actually checking in with them, you know, and when I say checking in, it's almost like listening to what they're saying and reframing what you think that they've actually said. So if I use one of your questions, Helen, and I'll actually pull it up, it's, you know, is it considered a weakness or a strength to be an emotional leader? So I would say, so you're asking me two questions, if I'm hearing you correctly, and that is, if you're emotional, is it perceived to be a weakness or is it perceived to be a strength? Is that what you're actually asking me? And so that actually diffuses situations. Does that sort of help guide, you know, you around how to actually work within an emotional state? If you actually find that you're becoming overwhelmed, Helen, there is nothing to say, hey, I actually just need to step out and get a glass of water. And I don't think that, you know, certainly females won't, you know, think anything of it. You need to actually take a time out, do whatever it is that you need to do. You know, for a male, Frederick, would you actually be opposed to, you know, somebody actually saying, can I have, you know, a moment, I just need to get a glass of water in that, so that, and you can see that they're emotional. How would you actually feel if you were in a discussion like that?
I think on my side, I wouldn't see any problem to that.
And would you feel comfortable to do that?
Yeah, I would.
So,
Because I think, it's better that than continuing, I don't know, maybe talking or maybe expressing something, and as a result that the conversation or the meeting doesn't end up the way maybe you're expecting it to be.
yes. And, you know, and that, what that also does is it also gives that the other person or the other people that are actually party to that to also reflect, right? It's not just about you. So just remember that irrespective of what the situation is, there is always going to be a multiple part to that. you're actually one piece of that, and you're experiencing what you're experiencing, but others around you are also sharing an experience too, whether they're actually aligning, with what you're feeling emotionally, or whether they're actually experiencing something else. They're still actually processing, and they're still feeling something. So they too need to unpack what's going on for them, right? So it's always about having that, or giving yourself that ability just to stop. And, in your words, Helen, it's to breathe. And breathe might be to be silent, or breathe might be to actually sit back and reflect, or take yourself out to get a glass of water, or whatever it is. But it's really important that you take that moment, right?
Yes, yes. Understood, understood. And I particularly like the part where you talked about when you're emotional and when you allow yourself to process it, then it's almost it's gosh, I'm not getting words for it. It's almost like as though you are giving people room to enter in your space. And I just see it as a point of building trust towards other people. I know that if someone would feel comfortable to tell me, okay, I'm going through this, I need certain minutes, certain number of days, can you take this up so I can do something else, so I can get myself together, I would respect them more rather than if they just, didn't communicate that.
And usually what happens is people will shut down. So when that reach that point of emotional state where it becomes a crisis, then you won't have that communication with them. You won't have that relationship. So ultimately what happens? They actually shut down. They shut you out. You don't know what's going on. And what needs to happen in that work environment doesn't happen. So you have such a negative flow-on effect, when you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable or to be seen, in a different light. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. I think all my questions are answered, and we can just allow for some interaction and other questions beyond this.
Okay.
Yes, so you can take that over. If anyone wants to ask something personal around emotions and business and et cetera, please feel free to jump in.
Whilst everybody's actually thinking about or actually preparing themselves to be brave to ask a question, I think, over the years, I've actually learnt that a lot of people actually view me with a really different lens to the way that I actually view myself. And, just recently, I actually was doing a presentation, and look, speaking was not really part of my, I guess, vision in the way that, I do business, but I was engaged to do that, and I had a national speaking engagement. And when I'm talking to my peers, when I'm talking to CEOs and MDs, across the country, and it's particularly in my, business sense, I'm okay because it's talking about things that, I can rattle off. But I also was actually engaged to talk about something that was very personal, and it's actually about standing up. And what I discovered was that whilst I'm actually externally appearing to be, quite confident, and, people actually say to me, how do you actually get up publicly? How do you actually speak? And the one thing that really triggered me in that sense was that so many people have actually said, Kathy, you have actually given me courage to do this. And the only time that they've actually been able to hear what I've had to say was during a discussion. And it might actually have been, through a small team meeting, but in listening to me, something has actually triggered for them. And so you guys as leading teams, you know, whether you're parents, you're still leading, whether you're actually in a business forum, you're leading, whether you're in a school and you're lecturing, whatever the case may be, you know, you are always actually being heard in some way or another. And in that sense, you're leading because people are actually listening to you. So for me, it was, I'm actually prepared to stand up and be vulnerable, because I am vulnerable when I'm actually, you know, standing up and talking to hundreds of people. It's important to recognize that it was not about me. You know, it was actually about what I could do to maybe help the people that were actually there to hear what I had to say. Because they're there, and actually what they're doing in that moment is actually turning what I'm saying and making it relate to them. So, you know, what is it that they can actually take away and then put into practice for themselves? And so, you know, when I was saying earlier, you know, when you're vulnerable, that's what people actually see. The moment that they actually feel that they're in a vulnerable moment, they will actually have a recall that Helen actually took time out, and it's okay for me to do it. But if you don't do that, and you are this stoic, you know, person that continues to just portray this armor of confidence, then if they can't be that all the time, they will actually internalize and tell themselves they can't be you. They will never be able to be you. So what you want to do is create that footprint, create that path, create, you know, something that is actually tangible that they can relate to and adapt to themselves, so that they can be as successful as what you are. They can actually do what you do as well. And that's what it is to actually be a leader. Does that make sense, guys?
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
A question.
Yes.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yep.
I would like to ask, what if you're working in an environment where the people, you know, like exact men especially, they have this notion that women are so emotional and maybe not fit to lead or something like that. Um, and the things that you do, like how you advise, maybe you find time out, or maybe say, okay, I'm not ready to talk about this now, or something like that. They feel like you're emotional and you don't fit to lead them. Um, how um, how can you deal with that without you know, sometimes you just find yourself breaking out because now they don't give you a chance, and you just can't deal with everything that's on you right away. What do you do?
So the first thing that I would actually ask is, have you actually had that discussion with them up front, or is that actually something that you feel that they are actually perceiving about you and your competencies?
I have had that discussion. Someone would say, you know what, you women are too emotional. You're not fit to lead because the emotional part of you, and some of them, okay, I'm sorry, but they would attest that to some time of the month or something like that. So you would have that discussion like, no, it's not true. You understand? But they would still focus like, yeah, you are emotional. So I've had that discussion where I would let people know like, no, emotion doesn't mean I can't lead. It's just that yes, I'm emotional because I'm a human being. But it's really, really hard for them to understand. And they, anytime you do something or react to something, they just say, okay, you see, that's what we're talking about. So yeah, I've experienced that.
So I'm assuming that when when you're saying you see, it's somebody actually breaking down and crying. Is that right?
Not actually breaking down and cry. Maybe it's you're telling someone like, you know, like maybe you've told someone to do something a couple of times and they're not doing it, or they're not doing it right. So you would come and like make a point like, why are you doing this? You're supposed to be doing this way? Why are you not doing all this? So whenever you maybe raise a little bit of your voice, they just like say like, okay, that's what you're talking about.
So look, one of the things that I would say is people are always actually going to judge externally, but in actually identifying when you have somebody who is presenting to you that you're emotional, I would actually have a frank discussion with them. You know, how would you actually do this differently? And how would you suggest that, you know, I actually manage this situation? Because it's really important, and actually say to them, it's really important for me to understand what your expectations are, so that I can actually look to mirror that, or that I can actually look to deliver that. But unless you actually have a really open discussion and you actually ask them to crystallize what is it that you're actually expecting of me, so that you don't see it as being emotional, because I believe that I can lead. And to be honest, I think that you know that I can lead. It's having a different discussion with them, and you're not actually just allowing them to overpower you, and you're not just taking on board what they're saying to you in respect to see you're emotional. You know, it's irrespective when somebody it's irrespective of gender. If somebody actually doesn't perform and repeatedly actually doesn't do something, then it's very likely that you're going to actually be upset or disappointed. So some people may actually raise their voice, others may lower it. You know, when I'm really disappointed, I actually lower my voice. I make it so soft that they have to almost lean in to hear me, you know, and I do that because it works for me. So you might need to just find a different way of doing it. But before you even change the way that you're engaging in those moments, have that frank discussion with whoever it is to say, you know, I'd really like to understand what it is that you think that I could do differently, or if you could actually share with me what you would do in this moment, because I would like to actually embrace that. Right? Does that help?
Yeah, I think the I've never asked that question to someone like, what do you expect me to do? I think that would be something that would be very good to know.
And
Yeah,
it's the way that you
it has
deliver
answered.
that too. You know, it's not hands on the hip and what do you expect me to do? It's, I'd really like to, I'd really like to understand, what would you do differently? It's an inviting question. It's not a threatening question, right? Has anybody else got any questions that come to mind, or if you'd like to share something?
Um, I don't have a question. I'm actually, there's two of us here. Maybe Brenda would
Yep.
have a question.
Mhm.
But for me, I don't have a question. Hearing this conversation and trying to relate with what happens in the workplace, I think emotions and leadership, or just emotions in general, are not everyday conversations that you'd find in the workplace. And we expect people to bring their whole self, but at the same time uh filter some of it. Like you encourage, you'd hear the motto is bring your whole self to work, we care for you, and everything that we need you to be safe and all these things. But it's all about the bottom line. Anything that gets in the way of the bottom line is somehow frowned upon or sidelined. So as leaders, I don't believe, at least where I come from, there's enough conversation or even training for leaders to help their teams manage emotions and also lead, especially when people go through tough times. You'd see, like from where I'm working, it's easy to see when there's a pandemic, for example, you'd see HR stepping in. They've done a lot in terms of trying to talk about things that could affect someone mental health, for example. But I can bet it's not the custom all around. And maybe when someone has lost a loved one, or they're dealing with issues at home that would affect how they work, I'm still not very, like, I cannot attest how these platforms that are there, if people feel that it is safe for them to go and seek counseling or to seek help when they find themselves in situations where their emotions are somehow getting in the way of their life. It's not only work, because it's life in general. So well, it's been inciting for us to know it's not a weakness bringing your emotions to work, because we are emotional beings as human beings. But as leaders, we need to find a way to manage that and help our teams through it. But it's very difficult to help someone deal with something that you don't know how to deal with yourself. So, well, all I can say is thank you, Helen, for raising this topic up, because it opens conversation and just strikes the mind to think at a different angle on how can we lead teams. It's not just execution. These are some of the things that would get in the way of executing a brilliant plan. Yeah, so thank you for bringing this up. And thank you, Kathy, for sharing.
Look, it's a pleasure, and I can certainly appreciate what you're saying. It's about change, change and transformation and culture. This is something that, look, oh gosh, it's probably about more than 10 years ago. I actually ended up working in an environment that, I understood. I was very astute in my work, but it actually meant in one particular, period, I was dealing with clients that were suicidal. I had a client on the phone one night ring and say, "Hey, Kathy, I'm sitting in my car." And I said, "Oh, what are you doing in your car?" Thinking nothing of it. And she said, "Oh, I've got the exhaust. I've got a pipe from the exhaust, and I've actually just wound up the window." And, in that moment, as strong a person as I was, as much as I understood about, the work, finance, the processes, litigation, all of that, I actually realized that I had a human being at the other end that was reaching out. And that's what you guys need to understand and continue to actually lead for your people, in seeing that there is more. And the only way that you're going to make those changes is by actually allowing yourself to continually show that, hey, we are all, a whole person. And yes, we do actually come across situations that are challenging, that are going to actually be confronting, very difficult for us to actually manage. And sometimes we're going to struggle. And so through that process, they too will learn, and they will then actually react the same way with their people, with their kids, with their families. But until we continue to have those discussions, until we can actually continue to show that we're going to support them to the best of our ability, then we won't actually be able to lead. So I ended up taking a 4-year sabbatical, after I had probably about 3 of those incidences. And I ended up studying counseling and psychotherapy, because for me, it was important that I actually brought another skill set to my actual work, even though it had nothing to do, with what my actual business was. It was important that I actually understood the impact of emotions. And, you guys here are actually recognizing that. And I can tell you, from a productivity point of view, when you actually make people feel that they are valued, and I go back to my earlier point, if they feel valued, then you're actually building that trust. What ultimately happens in a business forum, it actually increases productivity, because people want to contribute. They actually want to feel valued, and they actually want to know that they're on that journey with you. So innately, productivity and efficiency actually occurs within them, right? So the time when bottom line is impacted negatively, it's detrimental to the business, is when you don't have a workforce, or your people don't feel like they're valued. It actually plummets. So if you're seeing a bottom line being affected, go back to the core of what it is that's driving it, because I can assure you that it's not about them being emotional. It's about the fact that they're not feeling valued, and they're not feeling respected, and they don't feel like you trust them. right? And they don't trust their leaders. They don't trust who they're working for. That's the cause of it.
So Kathy, I'm not sure we said 40 minutes.
Yes.
44 minutes. I'm not sure if there's anyone who has something like super pressing.
If not, if questions do come to mind, you can always go to Helen, and she'll shoot through some questions and then actually post them. That might be better so that everybody gets to see them. But I think Helen has actually asked, if we can actually do this over a few sessions with slightly different topics. And that will then actually enable you to also, bring a few other questions or suggestions or discussions, to the table.
Yes, definitely. Once again, it's just to remind people that who you have around you is very, very important. And I feel like I am blessed to have an amazing circle of people who help me and guide me. And I feel that that is a privilege and not everyone has that. And so in a discussion with Kathy, we decided why not help another person in our discussions as well. So if you have any questions, if you have any topics that are pressing, my network is your network. So yes, you can send me topics and we'll discuss it with Kathy over the next couple of weeks. And thank you very much for the time. Kathy, thank you very much for doing this. I know you could have been doing so many other things. Yes.
It's a pleasure. It's actually a passion of mine. And Helen in Tanzania, she'll tell you, has actually got a big spot in my heart. I'm very, very passionate about, making a difference across the globe, but very much so in Tanzania. So thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing this time, because your time is just as valuable. Okay. And thank you, Helen.
Thank you, everyone. So I will be posting next week's. Please get back to me if you have any questions or topics that you want to be discussed in the next couple
Brenda
of
has
weeks.
something to say.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Kathy, do you have a few more minutes?
Sure.
Yes, I think I'll be the one closing. So, first of all, thank you, Helen, for this platform, and Kathy for bringing in the input that's really, I would say, it's amazing to actually think of the things that you can do instead of being emotional and overreacting and taking things to heart. The point that got straight to me was, if something happens and you're not comfortable on how to react, you just say, excuse me, I'm going to grab a drink or a glass of water. That itself takes you out of, this is not about, it's not personal. It's business, and I have to be more civilized, if I should say, about it, and react as a leader. Even if I got a bit offended or I felt like it was unfair or anything, but taking a step back by actually drinking water helps you reflect differently than just starting to talk right there and then. So thank you very much for that. And I look forward to many more of these. And asante sana.
Ah, yes. Asante sana, back to you. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.